Our top story at this hour, border tensions between India and China are escalating once again. There has been yet another face-off between Indian and Chinese troops. This time, the skirmishes took place in the Tawang sector of Arunachal Pradesh in northeast India. On the 9th of December, that's 3 days ago, PLA troops crossed the line of actual control or tried to do so in the Tawang sector. The Indian troops responded in a firm and resolute manner. The face-off led to minor injuries to some personnel on both sides. The soldiers on the two sides immediately disengaged from the area. Subsequently, India's commander in the area held a flag meeting with his Chinese counterpart to discuss the entire incident, in accordance with structured mechanisms to restore peace and tranquility. This is not the first time that Indian and Chinese soldiers have faced off in Tawang. In October 2021, the Indian Army had detained some Chinese soldiers following a minor face-off and clashes between the two sides. The latest skirmishes come days after India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar had said that India would not tolerate China's attempts to unilaterally change the line of actual control. Jaishankar had further warned that if China continued to build forces along the border, it would have a serious impact on the relationship between the two countries. Now, if you remember, just a few weeks ago at the G20 summit in Bali, during a welcome dinner hosted by the Indonesian president, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi informally met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two leaders were seen shaking hands. This was the first meeting between the two of them since the 2020 Galwan clashes. That border skirmish back in June 2020 in the Galwan Valley of eastern Ladakh had left 20 Indian soldiers dead. Indian officials say many had died on the Chinese side as well. To give you a background, ties between India and China went south after clashes between their forces in the Galwan Valley. It was one of the bloodiest skirmishes between India and China in almost 40 years. As we said, 20 Indian soldiers were killed in action. As for China, according to reports, some 40 Chinese soldiers were killed in the clashes. And since these clashes took place in Ladakh's Galwan Valley, there have been several rounds of military-level talks between the two sides to find a resolution and ease the tensions in eastern Ladakh. Both sides have disengaged from several friction points, including those in Galwan, Pangong Tso and Gogra Hot Springs areas. China has in many ways tried to provoke India following Galwan, and the latest face-off in Tawang is clearly yet another provocation along the line of actual control. For more on this, WION's principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal sent us this report from New Delhi.
In a concerning development, the Indian sources have confirmed that India and China, the troops, have had a face-off at the line of actual control in Arunachal Pradesh. Now, this development comes at a time when the relationship between Asia's two largest economies have been going southwards, primarily after the Galwan incident of 2020, in which India lost a number of its soldiers. China also suffered casualties, and we have seen India increasing its scrutiny on Chinese investments, banning Chinese apps. And this development, while it has been said that the soldiers got minor injuries, is only going to exacerbate the frosty ties between Beijing and New Delhi. Now, we also know that the incident that has occurred in Arunachal Pradesh is first of its kind incident being reported since the Galwan clashes. And we also know that what the Chinese think about Arunachal Pradesh, they have been staking their claim on Arunachal Pradesh, calling it South Tibet. So it looks like that it will be long time before a relationship sees any kind of normalcy. Siddhant Sibal for WION in New Delhi.
For more on this story, we're now joined by General J.J. Singh. He is the former chief of the Indian Army. General Singh, thanks so much for joining us here on WION. Now, the Galwan clashes that left 20 Indian soldiers dead are still fresh in public memory. How seriously is the Tawang face-off being viewed by New Delhi? As a former armyman, would you say this is yet another grave provocation by China? And how is India likely to respond?
Neha, I think that India should not be provoked by China. This is an endeavor by them to raise the temperature on the line of actual control. We are very clear in our minds that if they enter into our territory on our side of the LAC, we will throw them out. And we've shown it in Galwan, and we will also ensure that our borders are safe. I want to mention to you that the Chinese have learned a method of not provoking the countries which are strong, but they will try to see that they should try and carry out certain actions to raise the temperature. And therefore, I believe that we must not get provoked, and we should be ready to face any situation that arises. To my mind, the Chinese are not going to do anything more than what they have done. And in fact, as I have experienced in 1999, they also at that time surrounded this post of Yangtze. And I was the additional DGMO. I was told that what do we do? I said, do not do anything. Wait. If they are throwing stones, do the same thing, but don't open fire. Now, that is why I say the Chinese cannot be trusted, and they are understanding China is a major problem. No country generally has understood what the Chinese are doing. And I think we also have to learn how to understand them. We are doing better than before, but there's a lot to be done.
Right. Now, sir, of course, the India-China border dispute goes back many decades. However, you would agree that tensions have gone up significantly since the Galwan clashes of June 2020. And since then, there have been multiple rounds of military-level talks between the two sides, as you're well aware, sir. Yet, fact of the matter is, China continues to make repeated attempts to unilaterally alter the line of actual control. And therefore, the question is, while you're right in saying that China cannot be trusted, how does one achieve any degree of de-escalation with that country, a country that continues to provoke?
Well, I would say that the Chinese have not adhered to agreements signed between the two countries at the highest levels, that is of 1993, peace and tranquility on the borders, 1996, confidence building measures. In fact, their lies have been proved to the whole world. In these agreements, it is stated very categorically that no major large-scale exercises will be conducted by either country of a division size or more. Now, they came into Galwan with 3 divisions or so. So what is the Chinese answer to it? They have no way. I think Xi Jinping wanted to show something spectacular before the 20th Congress, which took place in Beijing, to strengthen his own position. And it has not succeeded. Even earlier, they tried the same thing in the Bhutan and Sikkim border. Now, what I'm saying is that the Chinese also understand how to play a game of psychological imperialism. I've used this term in my book as well. That means they do actions and they make statements for psychologically influencing their adversaries or potential adversaries. For example, Xi Jinping said, my army should get ready to fight a war. So what happened? Now, similarly, they do not follow what they agree. Now, for a responsible nation like China, they ought to understand the whole world is watching them, and no one will tolerate any behavior or pattern of actions which are not in which don't go along with the way of functioning of countries in the world. The international order does not permit them to do that.
Right. Now, it's interesting. There is psychological warfare. You're talking about psychological imperialism. China is constantly accused by the international community of engaging in hegemony and imperialism. Several countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom, and leaders such as British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, are on record as having said that China today perhaps poses the single largest security threat to the world. But let me ask you this, sir. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping recently met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali. The two leaders were seen shaking hands, though many felt that there were frosty vibes. The question is, to what extent is this latest incident, this provocation by China, likely to hit the already fraught India-China relationship?
I think, Neha, it is not going to help improve the relations. On the contrary, it will make the world realize that we are a region where conflict can take place. Now, I want to mention to you that the Chinese know how democracy's weaknesses and vulnerabilities are. And they play on that because they know a small incident like this will be played up by the media and the opposition parties like they used to do 100 years ago. And when the young husband expedition came in, the Chinese military attaché in London was telling them how broken the British resolve is to come into, to stay in Tibet. So I would like to say that having done a research on this subject, China's real problem is Tibet. They have not been able to sinicize Tibet, and therefore they have been unfortunately not successful in that. And they also know that how they can influence the minds of the democratic countries where everything is an open book. In their case, we do not know who ordered this recent border skirmish, or who ordered Galwan, or who ordered the previous incidents in Doklam and so on. I have been, a governor of Arunachal Pradesh, and I have seen that the boundary is very clear, and the McMahon line is very clear to make sure that that there is no problem created as far as the boundary is concerned. 90% of this 1,070 kilometers McMahon line, which is the LAC today, that was drawn up in 1914. And now I want to tell you that it is very clear, 90% of this boundary lies in very high altitude regions. And the ridge lines are clear, the boundary is clear. Problem comes up in certain valleys where the boundary has to go down to the rivers which are coming from Tibet into the Assam plains. Now, in these valleys, it's sometimes a difference of perception that are we on the right side of the LAC or not. And when the Chinese make a mistake or they do it deliberately, we retaliate and we tell them to return back. Now, therefore, I feel that India should just stay calm and ensure that the Chinese are not allowed to come into our side of the LAC.
Well, clearly the Indian Army is doing its best to ensure that. At the moment, it is very clear, sir, that there is no end to provocations from China and to its hegemonic designs. And it is certainly not going to help improve the already fraught relationship between the two countries. But your message is India must not get provoked. General J.J. Singh, pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with WION.
Thank you very much, Neha.